Hello and welcome to the Career Compass, Series 2, Episode 2. It's my great pleasure to be joined today by Stephen Edwick, Head of Product at Pointr, the deep location company. Stephen, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for having me. I think it's a great topic to have a chat on. I'm looking forward to discussing it with you.
Absolute pleasure. No, it's great to have you on. How's 2024 going for you so far?
2024 is interesting. I'm still quite new into a new role, and the weather's quite bad still, which is pretty standard for England. But overall,
Yeah.
it's 2024. It's treating me like every other year did.
Well, this is it. And we have to look at the positives. Spring's on the way, plenty of daffodils out there, there's sun threatening to poke through the clouds. So, hope springs eternal, right? It should improve soon enough.
Absolutely. I'll believe it when I see it regarding the sun.
Well, Stephen, our topic for today's episode is neurodiversity in hiring. I know that you're a strong advocate for hiring neurodiverse talent into the workforce. And from my perspective, it seems to me as though this is an area which is still little understood by most people. Could you maybe start us off by explaining what neurodiversity is and why it's important for workplaces to recognize and support it?
Absolutely. I think it's a great conversation to be having because I think it's something that's been somewhat stigmatized over the years. And I think that neurodiversity, to start with, defining it is very difficult because to every individual, you're going to find a different definition. To someone, it might mean that they have trouble with their timekeeping or trouble reading. And putting a label or a definition on it doesn't help these people with the problems. So to me, neurodiversity is a way of saying, hey, I'm different. I work differently. I think differently. I struggle with different things, but I also excel at different things. And to me, that's why it's important to discuss it with regards to hiring, is that because I'm different, yeah, some things I just won't do as well as a normal person. But there are some things I will do that a normal person simply can't do. And it's no different to when we go back, 20, 30 years and we started looking at hiring diversity in the workplace for different nationalities or for women, is that they bring different perspectives, they bring different thought patterns, they bring different values to your team. And I think neurodiverse people offer exactly the same. You put a room full of people with the same thought pattern, you're going to come up with the same product ideas, the same, yes, 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 I agree. You put one person in there that thinks differently, suddenly you're different to your competition. I think that's immeasurable in its value.
Absolutely. What would you say are probably some of the most common misconceptions about neurodiversity in the workplace? You said it's obviously been a stigmatized conversation in the last few years, little understood. What kind of misconceptions still exist in your view?
I think it's around people focus on the negatives of it. So we need to accommodate this person. This person can't do that. They're different in that. They're not going to be good at this. No one really tends to look at, oh, we should hire someone neurodiverse because they can do this or because they can do that. With a dyslexic person, people go, oh, well, will their emails be good? Will they be able to write documentation? Someone that's ADHD, will they be able to turn up on time? Will they be able to focus? No one ever says, well, we need some creator out there. Let's get someone that thinks a bit differently in. And I think that that's what really I try and push is that, yeah, there are those negative sides, but that's not the most important part about us.
It's the importance of having open, frank conversations. As you say, is there a risk that people are because it's misunderstood as a concept, are people overcompensating? Are they trying to make allowances that maybe don't exist? Or are they shying away from having that transparent conversation about strengths and weaknesses? Probably, I would argue.
Yeah, I entirely agree. This view I could do. What can we do to support you? They didn't offer anything. They didn't suggest anything. Because I'm a reasonably senior person, I've dealt with it all before, so they didn't need to give me the, oh, there are some things you may not know about, because I probably know about them. They just asked, what do you need? And all I said is, well, some patience. We're heavily on Jira, and I may not be as good at replying to a Jira ticket as I am at doing another task. And they responded with patience there. And that's it. That's all I needed in terms of accommodation. But it was a much less frustrating conversation. There was much less resource used because someone just asked me. Not a penny was spent on accommodating me because they didn't need to.
Yeah, just have that kind of open, curious mindset, offer support and enablement where it's needed. But I think essentially if it's something that people aren't overly familiar with, the better approach is to say, okay, we want to remain open-minded, we want to support you. you tell us how we can best help you, or where we can best play to your strengths, or where you may, provide some extra support in certain areas if required. I'd love to hear a little bit more, Stephen, about your own personal journey and what you've kind of experienced along the way. You know, going into your career post education as a neurodiverse candidate yourself. What kind of things have you observed, and what things have you bumped up against along the way?
So I'd actually really like to answer this question by taking on a bit of a journey back in time here, because I'm getting
Sure.
old now. I was at school in a time when dyslexia wasn't really recognized as the thing. You were just stupid. That's how it was. It's not nice,
Mm.
but it was. And I was placed in the special needs class for pretty much every subject. I was reasonably intelligent. I scored very, very highly on my tests. I was put in special needs. And the reason being is that my work, my writing wasn't really legible. And this is, well, he must be stupid. And I had lessons on filling out fast food applications. You should aim at this. So here's how you fill out to work at McDonald's. Here's how you fill out to work at Wilkinson's. And I had lessons
Wow.
on that at school. And I think that tried to ingrain, certainly in people around me, is that, well, you can't really amount to anything. Now, some type of people may respond to this and go, well, I can't be anything. But for me, this pushed me to say, well, actually, screw you, I can. I'm going to do it to prove a point.
Yeah.
Once I left school, which was that very close-minded area, I went to do a degree, and suddenly I exploded because there was no one trying to teach me. I went to lectures, I self-guided things, and I was able to find my own path, and I excelled at that. And then I went on to a master's, and I went to a working career. And I think from those negative experiences really gave me the drive to be where I am today. If someone had just said, hey, you're
Fantastic.
normal, or, here's some minor things, I don't think I would have pushed myself this far. It was a really, the proverbial, if you say I can't, I'm going to show you I can. And
Good for you. Absolutely.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think in the workplace, generally speaking, I've met with three types of companies that have no idea what to do with me, companies that think they know what to do with me, and companies that ask what to do with me. The ones that don't know what to do with me are great. I don't mind those because usually they're open to suggestion. Hey, here's what you should do with me. Oh, okay, that's easy. The ones that think they should know what to do with me are terrible. Every neurodiverse person is different. Every one of us will need different accommodations or no accommodations or want to be public or not be public. But if you start telling me what I need, you're never going to get what I actually want. And I think that works for most people in this situation. And then the best companies, like the one I'm at now, just say, hey, what do you need? Because there's nothing wrong with being ignorant to how someone is, but there's something wrong with being ignorant to being ignorant to it. So if you ask, you'll learn, you'll find out. And it's such an individual thing. It's not like accommodating someone in a wheelchair where, hey, everyone in a wheelchair will need a ramp and we have a standard width that will fit standard wheelchairs that can access the building. There is no one size fits all solution to neurodiversity because it's individual to the person. And that's where I really kind of push for accommodation is don't try and tell people to do it. And I think that's really influenced my journey as well, because early in my career, I'm a scared young lad working and I'm kind of saying, oh, you want to do these things for me? Yeah, great, let's do them. And I don't really need them. But now if someone starts trying to push things, say, hey, look, I'll tell you what I need. And I think people need to be better at saying, I will tell you what I need, but also being proactive about it. So it helps your journey when you go to HR and say, look, I am dyslexic, or I have ADHD, or I have insert whatever here. These are the kind of things I need to be accommodated with, or I don't need accommodation. I'm just making you aware. And usually it goes better if you take the lead because you are the expert on yourself.
Yeah, you know what you can bring, what you struggle with, where you can really enhance things, in terms of bringing value to a team or a company's performance, and I can imagine along the different strands or different definitions of neurodiversity, there will be kind of clear strengths and weaknesses. But as you say, on the flip side, there is no one size fits all. So it's probably very much an individual kind of solution that you could kind of bring to the table when speaking with HR.
Absolutely. It's very much that you need to have that backwards and forwards, and it needs to be each side learning from each other. So I'm learning how the company can accommodate me. They're learning how they can accommodate me, but I'm also learning what's available. Not every company can accommodate you in every way. If your job is to write, 1,000 pages a day, they can't accommodate you by not letting you write. So you need to work on a compromise. And I think that's the negative side that, people focus on too much is, oh, this accommodation sounds like a nightmare. Why would we do it? And then that will
Yeah.
lead on to
Yeah.
later in the conversation. Let's go and talk about some positives. Once you
Mm.
accommodate me, the amount, or, if you show me the patients, the amount of creativity you get out of someone that's neurodiverse, the amount of different perspectives you get, it really blows out the water what you're putting back in. And I think that
Yeah.
that's really where I kind of want to push for, is that companies that have asked me what I need and they've made sure I've had it, they get a
Mm.
lot more out of me, and they've often commented, wow, this has made a difference.
Mm. I mean, there's been the kind of well documented example of say savants and their ability around very complex mathematical equations, things like this. Could you share any examples of how the different areas of neurodiversity would contribute to innovation and problem solving within organizations? Any kind of key examples?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to lead on with some example of people. So we chatted briefly before this, but um,
Yeah.
I went and spent some time before this interview looking up notable people that had, various neurodiverse traits. And I
Mm.
was quite surprised by some of the names on there. And I picked out 6. And I'm going to pick out 3 that are great business leaders and they're great technically creative people. And I'll pick 3 that are very, very creative people in general.
Mm.
Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and it's theoretized because it wasn't really public at the time, but Albert Einstein. All 3 of those, certainly the first 2, are neurodiverse. They're a mixture of dyslexic, ADHD, and potentially autism in the 3 of them. They're some of the greatest minds in our, history. They are some of the greatest business leaders in our history. They're both
Mm.
technical, they're both creative, and they're balanced. And then you go on to Emily Dickinson, Andy Warhol, Tim Burton, some incredibly creative people, and they are all
Amazing.
neurodiverse as well.
Yeah.
And I think that, are they better than someone that's not neurodiverse? Well, maybe, maybe not. But do they stand out because they're different? Absolutely. And I think being different, while equal, often stands out better in society. If you have 10 people with incredible ability, and then you have one more that comes along that's still got the same incredible ability, it's slightly different. No one's going to look at the first 10. And I think that's where neurodiversity really stands out. You don't want 10 businesses doing the same thing. You want 10 businesses doing 10 different things. And that's where you really need to have different thoughts. And I think that's where these kind of people really make the difference. Steve Jobs is, Bill Gates are probably as talented as many other people out there. Certainly very, very intelligent people, but they were different. And that's where they've shaped the world we live in today. I mean, I'm sitting here on a Mac right now, it was created by one of those companies. You may well be on a
Yes.
Windows machine created by another. And
Yes.
the foundation of maths that goes into logic of all these, well, some of that was probably done by another neurodiverse person. It's surrounding us everywhere we are.
Yeah. A huge, huge kind of impact, huge contribution. And I dare say some of that kind of not just creativeness, but business savvy, can be, directly linked back to their neurodiverse, abilities or, approaches or different methods of thinking around solutions and thinking around problems, I should say, and finding solutions. So if we look at this from a recruitment perspective, and there may be senior HR executives or hiring managers listening and thinking about, well, how do we adapt our recruitment processes perhaps to be a little bit more aware or inclusive or to proactively go out and seek those skills to bring them in? What would be some of the kind of key strategic pointers to implement into a recruitment strategy around neurodiverse hiring?
I think to start with, I know there's a number of recruitment agencies out there that seek out neurodiverse people. Not for every role, but for the right roles. I think being open about, hey, we want someone that thinks differently. And also making clear, thinking differently means maybe a neurodiverse person fits into this role. They're really, really good. And the second is, I don't think traditional recruitment techniques really work for anyone that's neurodiverse. Take a dyslexic person. A CV may not be as good as the next person's because they're not as great at writing it, unless they paid someone else to write it, which is what I've done in the past to kind of get around this little hurdle. You look at someone with ADHD, they may not be as good as, initially in an interview if they're very introverted and they've got this and they've got anxiety, they're not good at timekeeping. So you need to kind of think about how you're recruiting as well as what you're recruiting. So the company I've recently joined actually is a really good example. So Pointr has quite unique recruitment process. I had to do two tests. One was pretty much a verbal reasoning kind of test, and one was a personality test. Well, that immediately says what kind of personality types I am. And although some of my diverse traits will show in there, it will also show the positives of them because that's the way it's angled. The next thing is there was a case study. Well, that case study gave me a chance to show what can I do beyond this piece of paper, which has all my experience that may not be written very well. That means that before I've even got into the door, I've already leveled the playing field because I've been able to show in 3 different ways who I am as a person. And I think that made a big difference because they had that on paper. And before they'd met me, they were like, wow, this person really fits our needs. Whereas if they'd just seen a CV, they might go, oh, this is boring. It's not particularly well written, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to talk to this person. So I think your recruitment techniques are important. I think your hiring process is important. And I think your intent to hire is important as well. So it's a bit of a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, again, there's no one size fits all methodology or recipe in this case. You just have to remain adaptable and open-minded. Kind of reminds me a little bit in terms of the approach to problem solving around one of the chat GPT techniques or prompts where you can use the temperature gauge and go all the way up to 2.0, I think, from memory. And that's kind of enabling you to feed in some kind of scenario and asking it to kind of turn up its creative scale to the max and coming up with really interesting, innovative ideas and angles that perhaps wouldn't normally kind of be thought about. And I'm just wondering, really, to try and put myself in the shoes maybe of a more neurodiverse thinker. What kind of approach would they take? And are they naturally kind of looking at this from a more creative, unusual angle in your experience? Is that what you've kind of observed yourself if you're looking at, say, product roadmaps or difficult obstacles in business?
Absolutely. The reason I'm doing quite well, or at least I like to think I'm doing quite well at my role, is actually related to that. So my CEO, Ege Akpina, he is probably the most intelligent man I've ever worked for. He is verging on genius. And he's the kind of man that the CEO that can do every role in the company better than the person doing it. All he doesn't have is time. And what that means is it's a really daunting task for anyone coming in trying to do a role because they need to do it to kind of that standard, and it produces great results.
Right.
Now, someone coming in thinking exactly the same as him, but maybe not being as intelligent, they're kind of doomed to fail. But I've come in and, because I think differently to him, maybe I can do something as well as him, maybe I can do something better, maybe I can do something worse, you go backwards and forwards. Because I'm different, I'm able to perform in a different way. And I really think that that's kind of where it comes from. Is I approach things from a different perspective. I think of some things that he may not think of. And as long as he's patient with the bits that I'm not quite as, great at, then we end up with a much more rounded product. We end up with better roadmaps. We have more innovative ideas. We stand out more from our competition. And I think it works out really well.
I definitely think so. I'm kind of curious as well to see how you imagine the whole field evolving in the workplace in the next 5 to 10 years. We're constantly in the motion of change, but it does feel particularly at the moment like the next industrial revolution is, raging around us. There's a huge amount of change coming in. Do you potentially see neurodiverse thinkers as being at an advantage at this juncture in time, particularly in the tech industry? Do you kind of have that view, or otherwise? What's your kind of perspective?
I think it's an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how we make it. If you have someone that sits there and goes, I can't do this, I can't do that, which inevitably those people do exist, then absolutely, they're at a disadvantage. But when you have people who say, well, actually, I can do this better than other people because I do it differently to other people, because sometimes different is better, I think they're at a massive advantage. Now, I think that from my experience, you have 2 types of people. You have most people that usually lean more creative or more technical. And it's very rare you kind of get both. And I think neurodiverse people tend to be technical creatives, as I call them. So they're very technical. I'm very technical in my background. I have a degree in programming, master's in networking, data communication. I've been a business intelligence developer. I've been a solutions architect. I've gone for all the techie roles in the world. But I've now gone into a more bigger picture role because I'm also quite creative. And I think that's where it comes a bit more rounded, is that you kind of get 2 in 1 when you're looking at a neurodiverse person, or at least in my experience. Again, every individual is very, very different. Now, in the future, I think that we're looking at data-driven decisions in business. We're looking at AI coming in. We're looking at diversity is becoming the norm. So, it's no longer unusual to have a very diverse workplace, which is great. And you're seeing better products. We're having more innovation in the world than ever before. And I think neurodiversity is just going to become another facet of this. It'll be another, we haven't got someone that thinks like this. Let's go get one. We haven't got this. Let's go get one. We need a different perspective. Let's go get one. But also, as AI comes in and replaces, AI is great at doing what you tell it. But AI in its current form, we're talking about language models, essentially. We're not talking about a singularity right now. And it's trained on what materials it's given. And if most of the materials it's given are, from normal people, normally composed thoughts, it's going to be thinking in that way. And I think a neurodiverse person feeding into it adds that creativity or that different thing. So I think we're going to look at neurodiversity becoming a trait that's in demand rather than a trait you don't want to have in the near future.
And if you were giving advice to someone at the outset of their career, for example, and you were able to say, well, look, here's my recommendation, here's my best practice of the direction to go in, would you say this is probably the best industry to be in, based on what we've discussed, or would you maybe consider there are other verticals that could equally be kind of suitable and relevant for them?
I think it entirely depends on the individual. I'd love to give an answer, and I think technology is a fantastic place because a lot of my weaknesses can be overcome by technology. Oh no, I can't spell very well. Well, there's an application for that. My grammar's bad. Well, Word will correct it for me. So technology is something I got drawn to because it hides most of my flaws for me without any effort. But it doesn't mean it's the only industry. Someone starting out, the best advice I would say is firstly be self-aware. So don't be in denial, learn what you're not good at. I read through maybe 100 to 120 books a year. And the reason I do that is because when I don't read, my reading comprehension drops very, very quickly. And that keeps me up standard. So my weakness is now one of my strengths because I work very, very hard at it. But that comes from being completely self-aware and knowing I'm bad at this. I need to be better. I did a master's to prove I could write. I wrote a 40,000 word thesis to, fantastic technical content. I had to work very, very hard at that. But I wanted to prove I could.
Yeah.
And the second part is being open, honest, and communicating about it. If you hide you've got these traits and you're not performing at work, but you haven't told anyone you've got a neurodiverse, well, guess what? That's on you. They don't have to accommodate you if you don't talk to them. They don't have to understand you if you don't talk to them. They can only take into account what you tell them. So go have a chat and say, look, hey, I'm dyslexic. I'm not as great at spelling, but I've got this thing to do it. When I do some work, can I get it peer reviewed, please? Oh, yeah, that's no problem at all. Peer review is great. And then you say, yeah, well, the advantage of peer review is we're doing knowledge transfer while we're doing it, and I can peer review theirs. Oh, that's good. And you start a company culture of helping each other out rather than just being accommodated for. You're improving how people work together. So that openness of communication is important.
Yeah, that's the transformation point, isn't it? And it's that old adage, work harder on yourself than you do on your job or your career, because then you're the one, creating solutions, working hard on weaknesses and finding, a better route forward. So I think when I was kind of doing a little bit of kind of high level research on this topic, I know that it really kind of boiled down to an overall generalistic view of three pros, three cons. The three pros being neurodiverse individuals bring unique perspectives, they bring exceptional focus, enhanced creativity levels. The three cons that were generally kind of thrown out were communication challenges, sensory sensitivities, and maybe some social interaction challenges. Do any of those kind of resonate with you, or do you think that's just too simplified a picture?
I think it's way too much down to the individual. So, for example, I'm a geek for all intents and purposes. I work in tech. I've always worked in tech, but I'm extremely extroverted. So communication for me is natural. I would say that digital communication I struggle with. So when, if we're working on a ticketing system like Jira or similar, I miss notifications. So yeah, there are definitely some struggles there. Sensory is not something I've really struggled with, and I think that's more specific to someone that may have autism or ADHD. You can get overloaded, but again, there are things you can do. I mean, I'm doing this interview with noise cancelling headphones on. If I have an office that's too noisy, too quiet, I can blast music. I can just have some silence. We can accommodate that. in seconds. I just press this little button here and it goes quiet. It's magical.
Mm.
So I do see those downsides. They can be definitely relevant, but also very easy to overcome.
I think even from a kind of selfish perspective, I was on a plane yesterday flying back to the UK, and I was kind of surrounded by lots of very noisy toddlers, screaming, making a bit of a racket. And although I felt tempted to join in at one point, I did have the advantage of some noise cancelling headphones, which I was very, very happy that someone had invented those at some point in the past. So as you say, technology around us is fantastic. There are solutions to any kind of individual weaknesses we can have, as you kind of gave the example of. I guess the next step now is for companies in general to throw this kind of into the mix of consideration when it comes to hiring processes, how they attract neurodiverse talent. It's potentially something for people ops folks to think about, because a lot of their experiences around the candidate journey, onboarding, are they getting what they need? Are they happy to work at that individual company? Are they being recognized? Are they being enabled? So I think those, for me, probably represent the next kinds of steps. But it sounds as though you've had a mixed experience so far in your career, where there's been some very understanding environments and some less understanding environments. It's kind of it's an individual piece, but I do see this becoming a topic for kind of closer examination in the next few years for sure.
I will say that one thing I look for in a job, more than what company I work, what kind of company I work for, what industry I work for, because being technology, I can be agnostic to industry. The first questions I always ask are around, what's the work-life balance? Now, that doesn't mean I want lots of time off. It means, are you flexible? Can I come in early and leave early? Can I come in late and leave late? Which can help me when I've got different times or I want to work at weird times. But also the company culture. The company culture matters so much to me. I will never take the highest paying job offer. I'll go for the company that has a culture that is, understanding, it's friendly, it's people you want to work with, you want to communicate with. Because wanting to work with someone is kind of half the challenge, right? And if you're diverse, you're struggling, and you've got a really cold boss or people around you that don't want to talk to you, you're not going to tell them about your problems. But if you've got a company, you go in, you're like, hey, how are you? And you're excited to see your coworkers. You can tell them, hey, I struggle with this. So I think company culture kind of starts from within. I think a lot of neurodiverse candidates, they know what they need and they kind of look for it before they even apply for the jobs.
I think so. And it's a really kind of, an inspiring comment that you made about your experience at school and how you were kind of being shepherded in a certain direction. The future was almost being prepared for you to say, like, this is where, your ability will lie. This is where you can aim. And, clearly displayed a lot of courage and determination to prove them wrong. And I dare say there are others that may have faced the same thing, particularly if we look at that list of, industry leaders, creatives that you mentioned that are all neurodiverse. It's quite a remarkable revelation, really. I wasn't aware prior to the interview that those individuals were neurodiverse. So very, very impressive stuff. And
neither was I, just to let you know. I had no idea half of those people were. And it was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
But it makes sense.
And then you have, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been illuminating. I appreciate you kind of coming on to speak with me about this topic, Stephen.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, I like talking. I like the sound of my voice, as you may have noticed through our conversations in the past and now. But I also think it's just an important topic that's close to my heart. So I'm glad to be able to speak about it. And hopefully some people actually listen to it.
Yes, hope so. And we'll absolutely be inviting you on to future events and webinars if you'd be kind enough to share your views. It was, as I say, very illuminating. So if any of our viewers or listeners do have a question they'd like to pose to myself or Stephen, you'll find our contact details in the episode description. And until next time, thank you for tuning in. Take care. And all the very best to you, Steve, going forward.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it. And
Pleasure.
always a pleasure speaking.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.